What's up guys, TechLab here. Now, one of my favourite games of 2025 has to be Atomfall, and for reasons unknown, because all of my friends told me it was a type of game that I wouldn't really like, but because it was based in the UK, I thought, why not give it a go? I like to support things like that, and to be honest, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was one of those games that I can play completely from start to end, even though it isn't the longest game, which is quite unique for me because sometimes I don't really get time to finish games like that, but I actually did with that one. What was more surprising for that game was actually how well it ran on most hardware. The developers have done a fantastic job of it, and because of that, I added it to our normal test suite here in the studio, so you will see it included in benchmarks going forward. But I actually wanted to see how far we could push that game. Can we actually play the game, which I paid £45 for originally when it was released, on a graphics card that costs the same? Well, I've got the game, and now I have a graphics card that cost me £45. So how well will Atomfall run on a graphics card that costs the same as the game? Well, today we're going to find out. Okay, so for those of you that don't know what this is an Nvidia Geforce GTX 1060. It is a 6GB model, and I paid around £45 for it. When I actually hit the eBay and used market, I struggled to find a graphics card that was powerful as this for £45. I don't really know what's going on here in the UK, but our used market seems to be a little bit crazy at the moment, so you're kind of restricted to this level card. A competitor to this would be something like the RX 580, but as they're going out of support now, I didn't think it was generally worth it. So I thought I'd try something different, and at least for £45, I got a pretty decent model, because this is the ROG Strix GTX 1066GB. It comes with a triple fan configuration, a very nice backplate. It actually looks fantastic in a system, even though it does seem to be extremely over well engineered for what it is. All of the GTX 1060s that I've had in the past, and it has been a while, have been much smaller than this. The PCBs are tiny, they don't use a lot of power, so they don't really need that kind of stuff. But of course, Asus generally make their ROG Strix models much bigger, much beefier, and much better looking, and they did a fantastic job of this one. It also includes RGB lighting, which is pretty crazy for a 7 to 8 year old graphics card now, but I need to install it into this system now to see if we can actually play Atomfall. I'm pretty sure it will play it, but I want to see what kind of experience we get out of it. So let's get it installed into the system. Now, like I said before, it's been a while since I've owned a GTX 1060, and it's pretty exciting to have one again back in the studio, because these graphics cards were extremely popular. In fact, they were sat at the top of Steam's hardware survey for the longest time ever. Nvidia did a fantastic job of it. It was a great price. It really kind of spoke to budget gamers out there. And it really showed, because it is probably one of their most famous graphics cards, kind of second next to the GTX 1080 Ti, and it's from the same generation. So Nvidia's 10 series were probably one of their best ever releases, because people remember them and they still game really well even today. But of course, we've got Atomfall started here. For anybody that hasn't played this game before, it does actually have some pretty decent minimum requirements. For some reason, they actually have it set to a minimum of an RTX 2060, which seems a bit crazy, because we've definitely played this game on things a lot older than that. I think they were kind of just covering their butts really when they kind of come up with those specifications, because the game does look fantastic when it's in high settings, and you'll definitely get it on an RTX 2060. But well, before we start the game, it does give you the option to change things. We'll head over to the settings, and we're going to start the game off on a low setting at the moment, so this is not going to turn off all of the fancy tools like motion blur and stuff like that. I don't really play this game with motion blur on anyway, so that's not a problem. And we're going to be running it in 1080p. The GTX 1060 is definitely a 1080p graphics card nowadays, although some games you can boost to 1440p, but it completely depends on the game. For now, we're going to leave it in 1080p. We're going to go for a low setting, and we're going to see what kind of quality picture we get. I'm pretty sure this is going to be able to play it, but it'll be nice to see what kind of performance we get with this kind of setting. And as we go through the game, we'll boost things up a little bit. Now, I will admit, without any kind of restriction on the performance here, the card does have a little bit of coil whine. It's a little bit buzzy at the moment. I'm not sure if you guys can hear that, but if you do hear it, that's exactly what it is. The card is kind of just sucking juice at the moment, and you can kind of see the RGB, but it's not very prevalent on the side. It's actually very nice underneath, but I'm sure we'll take a look at that at some point. We'll just start the game and we'll resume from wherever I saved it. The performance in the menu looked absolutely fantastic, so that's a good point, but obviously it's not going to give us a good judgment. And now that we're in game, we can see that this card has absolutely no issues. We're currently getting an average of around 117 frames per second with a 1% low of 112. That is most definitely a high FPS experience, although the game looks a little bit bland with the low setting. It's not as detailed, the shadowing is very basic, everything's a little bit paler, which is a little bit annoying, but apart from that, everything does seem to be running reasonably well. I mean, you could definitely play this game at a low setting. There's absolutely no problems with it if you have something even older than this. But of course, with this kind of performance and running at 1080p, we can definitely kind of tune things up a little bit. So let's head back over to the settings. I don't believe we actually have any kind of FSR technology in this game, but we do have access to the render scaling, so we can fine tune it if we get to a point where it's kind of too much for the system. But I think the first thing that we'll do is actually we're going to skip the medium setting. Let's not bother going for medium. Let's go to a high setting. That is generally the standard configuration that I will use on most things. We've left the render scaling at 100%, so we should get the best visual experience, hopefully. I'm thinking we can actually just tune that up a bit, but I'm not quite sure. So let's actually go back into the game now that we've changed the settings and see what kind of performance we get with that one. Now, as we go back into the game, we can see that things have dropped significantly, but the picture quality is so much better. There is so much more detail in things. The shadowing is so much better. Everything's a little bit more crisp, and we're currently getting an average of around 70 frames per second with a 1% low of 64. That means we're still beating our 60 FPS target, which we generally aim for. So everything is looking pretty good. We'll just run around a little bit and we'll see if we can get a bit more detailed. It tends to get a little bit more demanding the further you go into things like foliage, bushes, trees, that kind of stuff. So we'll head down here and we'll get into the town. As you can see, things are starting to build up a bit more. Our performance and our continuous is dropping now to around 56, 57, although it's just jumped back up to 60. One thing I've noticed with this game is it completely depends on what you're looking at. If you're actually just sitting still and you move the mouse around, you can see your performance going up and down depending on what you're looking at. The more plain of the background, like this wall here, we're getting around 95 frames per second. As we turn around and we start seeing all the bushes and trees, it's dipping down to around 50, 61, something like that. But as we kind of head into more detailed areas, things do fluctuate a little bit more. The graphics card's currently running at 100%, and it's staying nice and cool at 58 degrees, and everything is boosting beautifully. Like I say, it's really nice to have a GTX 1060 back in the studio because these graphics cards were so much fun. And it really is a good time to see what they can do against some real super modern games, because they are still generally supported by Nvidia, even though they are looking at cutting the support soon. But we're not there yet, and it's definitely worth checking these kind of things out. But so far, everything is still running beautifully smooth. We have a nice frame time. We have a nice average FPS. We have a nice 1% low. There's no kind of major stuttering, no major dips. So I think this is more than playable at a high setting with a GTX 1060. Of course, we only have access to 6 gigabytes of RAM, but we are only using around 5.6 gigabytes at the moment, so we've got plenty of space to go. I don't think we would kind of boost this game into 1440p with this configuration. I think we're going to lose too much, but the one thing that we can try if we head back over to the settings is, of course, go into an ultra setting. Now, an ultra setting will actually fine tune everything up into a much more heavier kind of picture load, and as you can see, the water itself just looked a lot better as soon as we did that. We haven't lost a lot of performance though. It's only around 10 FPS at the moment. We're currently getting an average of 48 frames per second, but we are starting to see a bit of stuttering on the screen. It's because our frame time has actually increased now up to around 22, 23, and it kind of jumps between that and 26 milliseconds, so that's not ideal. You can actually feel it in the mouse. If you turn, things are a little bit more stuttery, so I don't think ultra is the right setting for this graphics card. Most definitely you can play at an ultra setting on a much higher end graphics card, and it doesn't have to be too much. Even a GTX 1080 Ti will completely smash through this. You'll be able to get 1440p ultra most definitely. But as we're sitting in a scene at the moment, looking at the kind of trees and the bushes and the foliage, we're only getting around 32 frames per second. So that's not good. We don't like that. We want to target 60 FPS. So let's head back over to our settings. Let's see if we can set it to a high setting. And what we'll do is we'll turn our render scaling down to around 90%. If we turn it down to 90%, it shouldn't affect the quality too much, but hopefully we will boost back over that 60 FPS and things will be nice. Now, we've reset the stats there, and we are still currently getting around 50 frames per second. So this scene in the game is actually quite demanding. It's all these trees and foliage that are really giving us a problem, but the game is running a lot more smoother now because the frame time has dropped. We're currently getting around 11 to 12 milliseconds. Again, it depends what we're looking at, but so far this is absolutely brilliantly. I think we should definitely test this game out again at some point on an even older graphics card. I'm not 100% sure how old we can go. I believe it does require a DirectX 12 graphics card, so we are kind of restricted to the R9 300, maybe the high end of the 200 series. Definitely it will work on an R9 Fury because we've tested it and you get a pretty decent result there, but I want to see how far we can actually push it back. Sometimes games, even though they do say that they require DirectX 12, they don't actually use all the features in it, so you can get away with a DirectX 11 game. So maybe we'll try it on something even older, but I don't know. Let me know in the comments below. Do you think we should test Atomfall on a graphics card that is much older than a GTX 1060, or even maybe we can go as far as something like the 500 series? I think I do have a GTX 590 somewhere. That is a very good old classic dual GPU graphics card, so maybe that would be quite fun. Let me know in the comments if you want me to do that. But apart from that, the game is running beautifully fine. If anybody out there who is a fan of this type of game or really does want to play it, you don't have to spend a lot to be able to do it. The graphics card costs £45. The game is currently £45 on Steam, and you can get it much cheaper if you go to a CD Key website. Or if you wait for a Steam sale. I do believe this game is around £30 in this last Steam sale, so you can definitely worth getting it for that, and it's a lot of fun. It kind of lasts you a while if you do all the side quests and stuff like that. If you just go for the main missions, you can actually complete the game very quickly, but it's a lot of fun to play, and they've done a fantastic job of it. But anyway, that is Atomfall on a GTX 1060, a graphics card that costs exactly the same as the game. It's blowing my mind how well they've put this game together. It looks fantastic, it plays fantastic, and it is from 2025, so it is about 8 years newer than the graphics card itself. So, and because many people still have a GTX 1060, it's still a very popular graphics card today for budget gamers. They can get away with playing a 2025 game as well. It's a shame that this graphics card is probably really going to see the end of its life soon when it comes to other AAA titles. You probably wouldn't even get it to play things like Indiana Jones because it has no hardware ray tracing. It's not going to play things like Doom: The Dark Ages because of the same reasons, and I'm pretty much going to suspect that it won't play anything even like Alan Wake 2 because of mesh shaders and things like that. But I'm sure at some point we will give it a go. But there you go. Atomfall on a graphics card that costs the same as the game. Anybody can afford this graphics card, anybody can afford this game, and they can have a great time too. But don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, and also let me know what other games you think, or what other graphics card do you think we should test this game against. Make sure you drop that in the comments, and I'm sure as always I'll catch you guys in the next one.